All right. So where do we want to start our conversation? We can just launch right into it. And I'm just going to let you go. I'm going to let, this is your topic.
Well, I've been recently working, just turned into manuscript on a book for Centipede Press, which I hope that they like, but it ended up being kind of a massive work. And I was trying to trace really the history of American horror movies from about 1906, 1907 to 1948 to, ta-da, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
Oh, nice.
Oh, well, here, we'll do it the right way. There you go.
Oh, there it is.
And so it turned into this massive, epic journey. But it was interesting because I think, one of the big challenges, and every year we get another examination of Frankenstein, another examination of Dracula, what's really behind the mummy and all this type of stuff. And in fact, that was ultimately the biggest challenge is what do you write about that's new with movies that have had such enormous impact and so much enormous influence that I think their essential qualities get lost underneath their fame, which is, so disproportionate to what the movies themselves are. And everything gets obscured. And I think that's the real shame. It's like if you walk down the street and if you ask somebody about Dracula, will they know about Bela Lugosi? Maybe not. But they know Dracula. They know the character and whatever. And chances are the impact is from the 1931 movie or whether it's
they go, I want to suck your blood. That's what they know.
Exactly. And, you ask some little kid to draw Frankenstein, he's going to draw Boris Karloff, or at least, a variation of the Jack Pierce makeup with the bolts in the neck and everything. And, that's a real cultural weight that is actually on these films. And I think that's kind of what we need to clear all that away and actually look at these movies, not only for their value, but also for the fact that, man, when these movies were made, nobody connected with them was thinking about impact, immortality. They weren't thinking about television because it didn't exist. Mm-hmm. They were only, thinking about getting through the work for the day. And the movie, when it played, would it play successfully? And of course, even in the 1930s, reissues were very rare. That really didn't start until later on when the studios tried to, generate more money out of their libraries in some cases because they had to reduce their production schedules during wartime and, all kinds of different reasons. And also when things got sold to television. But so when these movies were originally made, it was not with any sense of grandeur. Mm-hmm. It was just a sense of we will do the best work that we can, and of course, there's all kinds of, history with someone like Bela Lugosi coming from Broadway and all the rest of that stuff. But I think it's like a fog in front of the worth of the movies themselves. It's like I always use Casablanca as an example because that movie is so famous, it can't be any good, Well, and I think that's a real burden that these original films actually have.
Yeah, I talk sometimes about, because I recommend a lot of older movies and classic movies, and even we see it with Citizen Kane. If we're getting away from horror, we see it a lot with these famous movies where there's I call it the burden of expectation, and it can't possibly. Oh, it came up with our Elvis conversation too, because people were coming to like Jailhouse Rock, and they're like, he's not really likable in this movie. There's a burden of expectation for these movies, and they can never live up to that because you think, Frankenstein's had 90 years to be mythologized and to that. I remember writing an article, I was probably close to 10 years ago, about the Universal monsters. And I said something to the effect of, these are the monsters that built Halloween as we know it, which is what you're saying too. You think about Frank, you think of the costumes, you think about even the shirt you're wearing, that silhouette, that the cinematography of the silhouette of Frankenstein walking up a hill. You know, these are the images that built Halloween as we know it. How can they possibly live up to that? So people come to these movies and they're like, I mean, it was okay. So it sounds like that's what you're talking about. You're trying to take away some of the expectation and some of that burden and just look at what they were and what they were intended to be.
I think too, because as you said, this burden of expectation, it can, I think, also cloud the quality of what is actually there. And people I don't think sometimes they don't relate to it in the right way. And I'll tell you, here's kind of an example.
Okay. Well, I'm curious also what you mean by they don't relate to it in the right way.
I think, well, first of all, I don't think anything needs to be contextualized anymore, because the idea of, oh, that was scary in 1931, but it's not scary now. Well, I don't know. I'm always amazed at moments, even in the classic Universal horror pictures, when things really do make you sit up and you're surprised, especially like sexual elements in the pre-code films and this type of stuff. It always strikes you as being a little unusual, and not just Universal. I mean, my gosh, you go to Warner Brothers, A Mystery of the Wax Museum, and you've got a heroin addict as one of the central characters and all. I mean, it's like, whoa, wait a minute. This is really out there, this stuff. And I did part of this book project. I did a thing about writing about King Kong. And first of all, I will stand by this forever, that the fight between Kong and the Tyrannosaurus is, to me, the most stunning stop motion sequence that's ever been done. It's absolutely incredible and has so much impact. But King Kong, it's why I think the Peter Jackson thing, well, or a lot of reasons, that doesn't completely work. But it is like the ultimate movie about the Depression. It's about bread lines. It's about people having no money. It's about people having no hope. And then they go on this adventure where they're looking for the pot at the end of the rainbow. You know, you've got a theatrical producer, nobody believes in it anymore, and he needs a hit, and he has to, you know, all of these elements. You have Ann Darrow, and her life is a mess, and, you know, it's just, and then when they return to New York, they're returning to New York as part of, you know, the upper 90s. Suddenly, now they're wearing tuxedos and they're in front of an audience that's paying $20 a piece to see King Kong in person, which, you know, was an enormous sum of money at that time. And it just hit me. I said, my God, this really is like this American success story, this American showbiz story, as much as, you know, Footlight Parade or Gold Diggers of 1935 or any of those films, because of course it's made during that period. And what it's doing is only accurately reflecting what was going on contemporarily when the movie was shot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think people forget about that because they think of the giant monkey.
Yeah.
And not all the things that go around it.
What do we do about that? I mean, I guess you write a book about it, but what do we do about it?
Yeah, I don't know, other than, you know, slapping people on the head with the latest Blu-ray release of something, you know.
Well, even then,
I don't know.
Even then, you go back. I don't know that that's included. You went before we started officially having this conversation. We were talking about Mystery Science Theater 3000. There's such a level of irony and snark to older content now. Can most people who are coming to King Kong today watch that for what it is, or are they watching it through all the filters and all the layers? You know, the Monster Kids, the shock theater era, they had a very different experience than anybody that's coming to these things now. So many times people, they email me and they message me like, hey, why do you like so-and-so? And I'm like, because it's wonderful. They're not seeing it. So I don't know what we do about it. There's so much cynicism in the society that we're overlooking the magic.
Well, I think, also too, if we can just at times, I mean, my gosh, what you're doing, and whatever we try and do on physical media. I give an example. I think here's a movie. Remember the Boris Karloff movie, The Man They Could Not Hang? Rewatching that movie, and it hit me like an Acme anvil on the top of my head. It's Saw. He traps all these people in this house that's loaded with booby traps, kills a bunch of them with an electrified fence and all these different things. He's watching it, and then picks up a sniper's rifle and takes a position above his own living room and starts picking them up. I mean, it's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And how in the world can anybody look at that and not directly relate it to what we would consider contemporary horror? Because the threads are absolutely there. And also, when we get talking about the pre-code stuff, there is a level of, especially in a movie like The Vampire Bat or things, there's a level of surprising sadism in these movies that if anyone would just actually watch the film, they would be jarred.
Yeah.
Because, like, wait, did I just see that? Did I just see them throw Dwight Fry off of a precipice to his death? Did I see, King Kong again? I mean, especially if you see the uncut version with the close-ups of the foot grinding the natives into the dirt, and he's biting off heads and throwing the corpses away. And you've got all of that. But the thing that really always gets me is that scream of the sailors. First, you hear it when the one sailor's eaten by the brontosaurus in the tree. And then when the log goes into the ravine and they're all still hanging on to it and it hits oh my God. I mean, that is so violent and blood curdling.
Yeah.
And, that's 1933. We're not supposed to be affected by that stuff, but we are, and we can be if anyone would just actually watch the movie. And of course, and then you get into the whole thing of, I can't watch King Kong because it's got all these racial elements and all these other things, which, that's a real juggling act, I think, with that movie, because it isn't just that, because of course there are crewmen of color on the Venture, and the natives, of course, especially in the South Sea areas, Noble Johnson and all these wonderful actors are not presented in a demeaning way at all. And in fact, they are scary. That wonderful moment when he comes walking down the steps to the Max Steiner score, even with, Robert Armstrong's famous line, it's, you don't know what's going to happen next, because these aren't, the natives that sometimes you see, running around, in a panic or anything like. Even when King Kong attacks, you've got guys in there and they're throwing spears at him and, all this stuff, trying to protect the village and what have you. So there are all these, I think, bizarre overlays of interpretation that keep hitting these movies that, in fact, maybe they don't deserve, or it shouldn't be quite that severe a judgment of the films themselves, and you miss out on so much because you're seeing them in this way. And I mean, my God, is there a more, at least from this period, sadistic movie than The Black Cat?
No. Satanism, skinning alive. I'm sure I'm forgetting a few other elements.
Necrophilia.
Yep, there's a big one. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I like to say that the 30s have become my favorite era for film, and it's because they did everything that we could possibly do was already done in the 30s. Now maybe it was done more expensively or more, quote epic, like Peter Jackson doing King Kong. Like okay, it's not for me, but
Yeah.
I understand that every generation, gets their own, hey, A Star is Born, right? Every generation gets their own version of these stories that go back. But it was just such a magical time, such a creative period, and they did everything. And even before that code crackdown, especially before the code crackdown, it's like nothing was off limits. Even people that go ahead.
No. I was going to say, I mean, one of the great examples is the amazing nude swimming scene in Tarzan and His Mate with Marino Soul. I mean, she's completely naked, and that's a long sequence.
Mm-hmm. How indecent! How absolutely inappropriate!
Yep.
Oh man, no, the 30s are just wonderful, and this is a challenge to me too. I have a tendency. This is my thing. I notice myself almost revering them possibly too much, and maybe that's part of what you're talking about too. Is like I'm so in love with that thing that maybe I'm not seeing them for what they really are too. Maybe I'm putting too much pressure on them.
No, I think that, when you see, okay, I'll give an example. Now, this was a big production, a major movie, the one I'm about to mention, that broke like every pre-code, taboo you could name, and that's Mamoulian's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I mean, that thing is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
It is so vicious. It is so sexual, with all the stuff with Miriam Hopkins is just amazing for the time period. And even when they tried, now, interestingly, when they remade it with Spencer Tracy and Ingrid Bergman and everybody, they tried to, if you will, tilt the approach a little bit to satisfy the censors,
Mm-hmm.
but it is in its way worse in like the death of Ingrid Bergman, because he freaks out and she's begging for her life. I mean, the scene's really unbelievable. And then he grabs her and throws her down on the couch, and we don't see it. We just hear it. And it's horrible.
Yeah.
And, obviously, if it was visually represented, then the censors would be there with their scissors and, all that stuff. But it was the impact is real. And I'm not that big on that movie because I think it's kind of stodgy and, it's too long and what have you. But when you look at the original version with Frederick March, what we're seeing is, again, just like with Frankenstein, with Dracula, with the Mummy, we're seeing the creation of something. And that's why I don't think these can be underestimated, but they have to be seen like, oh my gosh, I have seen a billion movies of variation on this theme, but I'm not appreciating the fact that all of this stuff had to start someplace.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's also part of the problem, is that there's such familiarity with the legends and what the creatures look like and all of that stuff. By the time you see the very first time it was done, it seems overly familiar because everybody's imitated it or sequelized it or whatever.
Yeah.
And, they become part of popular culture. It's, popular culture, my God, what they were was 6 weeks on Lancashire Boulevard. It wasn't, Yeah. That's what they were.
It was just entertainment. It was just a night at the movies.
That was it. It was just a night at the movies. And I know that, again, when you get into things like censorship rules and whatever, and we think about contemporary horror, say from like Blumhouse and places like that. And it's not just me being a cranky old man, get off my lawn. Man, nothing yet approaches the sheer twisted insanity of Mad Love. My God.
Yeah.
what they got away with in that movie is astonishing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't care what generation you are, when you look at that film, how can you not be mesmerized by Peter Lorre's totally gonzo performance?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an impossibility. Plus, too, of course, growing up as a monster kid, that Basil Goga's painting of him for that cover of Famous Monsters, when he's the, supposedly the transplant patient of Dr. Gogol with the, neck brace that's holding his head on his shoulders and all of that stuff. Absolutely wonderful. And it's terrifying. That is the stuff of nightmares. Not Jason Voorhees coming after you one more time.
Talking about 30s horror, do you think that is Universal? It's their genre, right? Are there any other people, any other companies or films that you want to talk about outside of, we talked about RKO, but anything else?
Well, I'll tell you, it was always part of the thing was with Universal, because I found that it's a little incongruous to always say that Carl Laemmle Sr. didn't like these movies, and Carl Laemmle Jr. was the one who was always carrying the torch. That's not entirely accurate, because Carl Laemmle Sr. actually is the one who bought Phantom of the Opera for Lon Chaney. He flew to Paris to meet with Gaston Leroux and buy it. And the very first big financial investment that Universal made in a feature film was 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. So this idea that the old man wasn't, interested in this stuff, or at least saw the potential in it, that's kind of become a little bit of the myth. But okay, you're in the San Fernando Valley with the chicken coops and everything else that Universal City used to have. Go over the hill to Gower Gulch. Harry Cohn wanted nothing to do with horror. He was very prestige crazy. And he was, because he felt slighted. He was down there. Columbia was kind of a cheap outfit. But what he wanted to concentrate on were, Frank Capra, The Bitter Tea of General Yen, or John Ford's Up the River, or whatever it was. That's what he wanted to know about. He certainly didn't want to know about the Three Stooges, as we know. That's kind of really famous now, that he, wouldn't even let him shoot on the lot. But there is a Boris Karloff. Karloff did a contract at Columbia that slopped over into the 1940s, but he did an early film there at Columbia called The Black Room that is tremendous. And that's you're nodding your head, because that's the movie, of course, where he plays twins. And again, you're talking about this sadistic deviance where you have the good, benign twin who's murdered by his twin brother, and then the twin brother takes his place, but he is slaughtering servant girls and, doing all these horrible things. And you're just like, oh my God. And it's not made for a great deal of money, although it looks like it was made for a great deal of money. And that was because Roy William Neill, who later, did all the Sherlock Holmes films at Universal and Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, did a beautiful job of directing this thing. And it is one of Boris Karloff's just absolute best performances of the 1930s. And again, it's startling because of its content. Now, another studio, and everybody always was kind of looking at the box office reports and deciding, Universal is making all this money with these movies. We've kind of got to get into the race here, guys. So find out what Karloff wants. Find out what this happens. And then we'll put it together and we'll do our own thing. The Mask of Fu Manchu? Good Lord. That shit's crazy. It's like, oh my God. And you talk about pushing the boundaries, particularly in this stuff with Myrna Loy. And when she's getting all, revved up when they're whipping the hero and everything, and it's like, whoa, baby, this is wild stuff.
Yeah.
And also, I'm not that big on Mark of the Vampire. which was also, of course, MGM from this period. But it is so exquisitely made. And the James Wong Howe photography and the just incredible moments with Carol Borland when she has the bat wings and all of this stuff. It's really something. And I don't think the movie really knits together the way that it should. And of course, it's Todd Browning, and he's remaking his own London After Midnight. But the visual panache and elegance of that movie is so extraordinary that I think this is like maybe even part of the lesson of contemporary horror filmmakers. Look at the way this thing is presented. It's absolutely flawless and, you know, gorgeous. And James Wong Howe and all of this stuff shooting it. And it's not rushed. And it doesn't feel like a second tier movie. Now, of course, it was MGM. And they weren't going to let anything out that they didn't feel properly represented the company and, you know, all the stars that they're in heaven and, you know, all that stuff, because they had an image they wanted to protect. But it's, I think that's something else that goes to the 1930s, that even if the films were made for, say, limited money, like The Black Cat, for example, I can't think of a more elegant looking movie than that, with this absolutely astonishing art direction. But it was a major film from a studio. These weren't throwaways. These were not the movies. Now, there are plenty of independent horror films, made White Zombie, for example, but the movies that we know or that were sold to television and we grew up with and everything else were major productions made by major people. You know, that era of the indie horror and all of that stuff. I don't want to, you know, wag a finger at American International or anything like that, but that came later.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, films done on a lower budget. And then, of course, Hammer comes along and shows what can really be done on a low budget. And, you know, the whole thing exploded all over again with the traditional monsters. Once again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's just, I don't know. It's, when you go back to those first films and you see, you know, a code breaker like Murders in the Rue Morgue. I don't know that that's a particularly successful movie, but it has some remarkable things in it.
Mm-hmm.
And what I guess I wish is that viewers who love horror now and are so willing to excuse just all kinds of crap would give these first movies that actually originated all of this mythology the same break.
There it is. That's kind of a great place to leave it on. Yeah. We're in an era where people are celebrating Al Adamson, you know, and all these really, really bottom shelf movies. And there's a whole ton of dozens of top shelf movies, maybe not always made for top shelf money, but very successful, good movies that are not being seen and not being championed. But people do seem to be finding them. So the Universal box sets that have come out, the Scream Factory, the ones we were talking about, the Scream Factory, Universal anthologies, those multi-movie sets, they are finding their way to people. And I think that conversations like this are important because the movies they're fantastic, and spread the word. That's if you love horror, and so many people do, you know, I do so many videos and people say, well, I mostly just watch horror. Well, are you watching these? Because these movies are so good. Let's talk about them. And you've got me so excited about this book. That's kind of a maybe. I'm like, man, what can we do to make this happen? Can we crowdfund this thing? What do we have to do? That's a thesis right there. That is some true journalism. So I'm excited about it.
So, well, we'll keep our fingers crossed. And
can we even talk about it? Like, that's clear. Like you've been talking.
I really just don't have any more details other than, it's going to be Centipede. And
Yeah.
I thought maybe it's going to be this Christmas. It may be held over for next year because
Mm.
I turned in this massive thing that they weren't expecting. So, but they've been extremely nice. And the books that they do are so gorgeous, and the
Yeah.
presentation is so absolutely beautiful. But, um, but we've got coming from Film Detective, Daniel and I have, Brain from Planet Eris. And a lot of people, David Schechter did a real neat intro to the film with Joyce Meadows, which is cool. Uh,
Wonderful.
yep. And we did, then I did on the documentary that Ballyhoo did about Nathan Duran. So that, and it goes into all of his, the Harryhausen stuff and the Columbia stuff. And we're getting ready to do Tarzan for Film Detective. But I've actually been getting kind of, I won't say hate mail, but irritated mail because in about 2 weeks from Lionsgate, I did the commentary on the Blu-ray release of Extreme Prejudice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it is
The Vestron
available
video.
Yeah. And it's coming, it's the first Blu-ray release of it ever. It's never, and it's got all kinds of really great bells and whistles. And you can pre-order on Amazon for $17. So I'm getting all these irritated notes from my friends and non-friends. Why didn't you tell me this was coming? I spent $60 on the German release last year. I can't believe I feel totally ripped off. I'm sorry, I didn't know.
It's currently $12.96 pre-order price. That is insane.
There you go. And there's a lot of stuff on that disc.
Yeah. But it's funny because Vestron was not cheap for a long time, and now it's cheaper than ever. And people were like, well, they'll leave all the special features off. No, you're on there, and there's so much good documentaries and all kinds of stuff.
And an interview with Michael Ironside about the shooting of the movie where he does not hold back.
Nice.
Because, that was a real chaotic shoot, primarily, unfortunately, because of Nick Nolte.
Yeah.
And so this is, I think it's really finally a document not only about the movie and, gives Walter Hill some additional props because, boy, he really had his hands full on that one.
Yeah.
And, he came through. So it's really cool. So those are the new projects that are, floating around. I got a couple of books, some short stories and things like that, but I'll keep you apprised. I can't, my memory has gotten so bad, especially with things like reprints of old short stories and stuff. Honestly, sometimes I don't remember, and it's like something popped up in my mailbox. I was like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot about this.
Like things that are being published that you forgot were coming out. Oh wow.
Yeah. Well, it's because when it happens, and then if it gets reprinted or something, usually they let you know like a year and a half before it actually appears, and you kind of goes out of my very limited brain pan. So
let me also publicly congratulate you. We were talking about this a little bit earlier, but there's a documentary on this release, this Criterion Collection release from Ballyhoo about Jack Arnold at Universal, and you guys won the Rondo. You're on it. It's he publicly thanked you on his Facebook page, and you're there. You're a big reason that it's so incredible, and Daniel as well. But congratulations for that. It's great.
Well, you're a nice guy. Thank you very much. I think the thing about all what happened with Rondo's really is it was just such a surprise that this occurred. But oh my gosh, I mean, what wonderful recognition! And my God, me, if the Captain Company still existed, I'd be ordering stuff from them every day. I'm just still the monster kid. That mindset. So even being, marginally involved in anything that wins a Rondo is just that's a reason for me to start dancing.
It's so well deserved. It's a great documentary. You're always associated with very high quality things, and that's why I'm glad that you're here talking to me right now, because you bring quality. You bring so much knowledge, and you're friendly and you're humble. I feel like such a student when you're here, and it's just a joy. I'm gladly taking notes. And when I edit these, here's a tip for the audience. Like when I edit these, I'm like, oh, write that down. I guess I gotta go check it out. And like I revisit that one. So like this one, I'm like, oh, I gotta go revisit all these Boris Karloff movies. And but it's not work, it's fun. It's a joy. So Joyner, thank you.
I'm just always so thrilled to come on here and everything else. I feel like Durwood Kirby on Merv Griffin or something. Now there's an old reference for like the semi-regular.
People are like, who's Merv Griffin, let alone who's Durwood Kirby.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry.
Tell people, like, you've told us what's coming up. Where can people get in touch with you? Where can they follow you? Where can they keep up with
I'm always tooling around on Facebook, and that's just under my name.
Yeah, and I'll link to it in the description of this episode, description of this video. Anything else you want to wrap it up there?
I think that pretty much does it for the time being. I'd like to, hopefully the next time we do it, I'll have a couple of things physically in my hand to show and wave around.
Sure, yeah, and I always try to put in as many screenshots as I can. Usually,
you're terrific with that, and but the next time, yeah, because Brain from Planet Eros, I think that comes out in about 3 weeks.
I think it does, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm excited about it. I'm really excited. What the Film Detective is doing with some of these older movies, these genre movies, I'm like, my goodness, and they're not all great, but that's not the point. Anybody that's watching these movies just because they want them to be great. Now, what we've talked about today, most of this stuff is actually great, but some of these movies that Film Detective's putting out are, I'm thinking, what's the Dancing Pirate? It's not great, but it's worth the watch. And you're filling in holes in your knowledge, and you're connecting dots to this actor, this studio, this era. And for anybody that's interested in film, this stuff's essential. And I'm so excited.
And they're doing restorations.
Yes.
So, what they did with even a movie like Giant from the Unknown and that stuff, my gosh, I mean, it was incredible looking. Mm-hmm. And it had never looked that good before. So it is really, if you want to explore this stuff, this is the optimum way to do it.
Yeah, well said. And you're going to be there, and you're going to be on a spectrum of releases that are valuable. So, all right, stick around. I'll say thank you and goodbye off the air. But guys, continue that conversation. Talk about your favorite 30s horror movies. What's next? 40s? Where do we go from here? Let us know what you want to see next, and we'll continue. We'll pick it up there. So, guys, thanks so much. Take care. Until next time, we will catch you later.